This is a G0458 open-ended 18-inch drum sander, and we were using it yesterday, the last couple of days, to take down the surface on some cypress planks that a friend had. We got them down pretty good, but I noticed it was making an odd noise every once in a while, and I thought from the noise that there was something getting in the drum and binding up between this sawdust deflector and the drum every once in a while. But I looked in there a couple times and I couldn't find anything, and so it was making a lot of strange noise, and I didn't think it was operating right, so we shut it down. So I pulled this cap off the top here of this transmission of this cover. This drum is driven with a V-belt from the motor down below, and there's a pulley on the shaft, and I noticed that this pulley was cockeyed on the shaft here, and it was way back contacting the bearing. There's a bearing plate that goes in here and a bearing for the shaft, and the pulley was way back, and I could see this. You can see that keyway right there. I could see that keyway right there was exposed, and the pulley was rubbing up against the bearing block on the back here, and it was spin on the shaft. It would spin the shaft, but then it would start spinning on the shaft and making a lot of noise. So I took it apart here. There's a plate that goes on back here, and it's just a thin plate that the bearing fits into. And here's the bearing and the bearing housing. It's just an open cage bearing, but the V-belt pulley was riding right over the housing on this bearing. So we took everything apart and took the pulley out, and I looked at the shaft, and it's fretted a little bit from where it was wearing on there, but it doesn't seem to be worn too bad. There's just a little bit of fretting on there. Ideally, it could take that shaft out of there and maybe turn that down, but I don't have a lathe long enough to handle that shaft, and I really don't want to tear it all apart. We got a blower in here for the sawdust sucker and everything else. So he said there's a keyway cut into that shaft, and then there's a keyway slot cut into the pulley, and there was a set screw in the pulley, but it didn't look to me like there was ever a key in this keyway. There's no sign of it being sheared off or anything else, unless it just came loose to the point where the pulley backed off and the key dropped out of there, but I don't see any sign of a key anywhere, and I don't remember hearing that happen. I think that it didn't shear off. There's no sign of it shearing or anything here. There's no leftover pieces in this sharp edges on this keyway where it was cut out. There's no material left on there from the key being sheared off or anything. I think that they just left the key out of that, and eventually it worked until we started putting it under big load, and then it started spinning on the shaft, and then it backed off. So we'll have to go through, I'm going to go through all of this and make sure all of these pulleys are on there tight, and any keys or anything like that are in there like they're supposed to be. Should have known better than to trust something out of the factory as being done properly. Now here's the pulley. I've got it set up on my little, this is a Sears Craftsman 109 lathe, 6-inch, 6x24, I believe it is. Anyway, I've got it set up on here on a 3-inch 3-jaw chuck. This is a bison chuck, and this pulley, the hole in it for the shaft was egg-shaped here. It was hogged out pretty elliptical out here in the front, but this pulley had slid back on the shaft so that the inside of the shaft was part way on. Instead of the pulley being completely engaged in the shaft, it was only part way on. So back inside of this, it was hogged out pretty good in there, and then it was a little bit elliptical on the outside, on the back side. So it was flopping around pretty good on that shaft. Well, what I've done here is there's a boss that sticks out here on the front of the pulley. Well, there's a corresponding indentation on the back side of the pulley, and I just mounted the pulley onto my 3-jaw chuck there on that and kind of set it flat tight against that. It's registered against it. And I mounted boring bar on my lathe and just started going in there and taking a little bit at a time off of there. Well, I started out, the last job and the first job I ever did boring was with this boring bar, and I did some aluminum with it, making a roller for my bead roller. And this is what I had mounted in my boring bar mount. So I put it in there initially and put some oil in there and started making a cut. Well, it sounded to me like it was cast iron, so the oil probably was a mistake to put in there, but it was cutting okay, just doing a little bit at a time. It was an interrupted cut, of course, because this thing was elliptical shaped in there, plus it got a keyway in there. Anyhow, this boring bar, you could watch it flex it back and forth like this. So I took it out, and I got a shorter, stiffer boring bar and stuck in there. And that seems to be working a little better. At least you can't see the flex on it. I'm sure it's still flexing, but there's nothing on this little lathe that is too steady. That there's slop in the compound, and there's slop in the cross slide, and there's slop everywhere on it. So we just have to kind of make do with what we get out of it. But it's coming out pretty good. I've got the hole pretty much trued out. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bore that out past where that keyway is, a little bit past that, and then make a sleeve, make a plug to fit in there, and then drill it out and bore it out to fit that shaft on the drum sander. And I'll have to figure out a way to cut a new keyway in there for that, so it's keyed on there and it fits on there right this time. But that's what we're doing so far. And like I said, this is cast iron. Tighten this up a little bit and start it up. Gauge. I'm only taking off just a little bit at a time. This lathe might be able to handle more than that, I don't know, but it's pretty light duty machine, and like I said, there's a lot of flex and everything, so if I take off 1,000 or 2 at a time, that's more than enough for this thing. So we can hear it hesitating now as it goes around that keyway. The interrupted cut there, but the rest of the cut's pretty smooth around there. I think I got all of the material out of there that was misshapen and stuff. So could make some kind of a sleeve and stick in there now and put it on there, but I'm going to go ahead and cut it all the way out, cut it all past that keyway and redo it. I haven't taken any measurements on any of this stuff yet to see what size anything is, so yeah. Just get this down to start with. Got the hole cut down past the keyway slot, so I'm not getting an interrupted cut anymore. You can see that the four springing back and forth with that interrupted cut, so should be able to make a couple of passes in here and get that hole trued up now. It's not interrupted anymore, so it's not springing back and forth, but I wouldn't expect the hole to be exactly round with it springing back and forth like that through that interrupted cut. But hopefully now we've got that out of the way, that we can turn that down and get a nice round hole there. I haven't measured anything yet. I'm going to have to measure the shaft there, which is immaterial right now because I won't need that measurement until I get ready to bore out the piece that I fill in there. I want to take this down far enough past where the original keyway bottom was, so that when I put a sleeve in there, a new piece in there, that I'll have plenty of material in underneath the new keyway when I cut it. Well, there's lots of material on that boss. It can come out quite a ways. Thing that I have to watch out for now is I start getting close to my jaws on my chuck in there. Okay, I got my hole pretty much cleaned up. I made 2 light spring passes on it to go ahead and true it up, because there's so much tension on that and it pushes that boring bar out that there's just almost no way you can get an accurate measurement or figure out how much you're taking off at one time. So I did one last turn. It was about 145 or something like that, and then I just run it through a couple more times, and wound up here with 146.7, 146.9, 146.9, 147, 1 inch, 469 thousandths. So it's 1 inch, 470 thousandths. So that's pretty good. I've got this piece of, I believe this is free machining steel. It's 1.5 inches, and that's what I got to fill that hole with. So that just leaves me just enough that if I just take a skim cut on that, just probably enough to take the rust off of that, that'll get me down pretty close to a press fit on this. But once I get them down close to where I have a press fit, then I'm going to go ahead and heat this up and cool this off and put them in the press and make a press fit. Now, I don't know what the diameter of the hole was when I got to the bottom of the keyway, but I think it was 1 inch, 300 thousandths. I've got 470 thousandths now. It gives me a pretty good chunk there to where to leave a metal in there behind the keyway after I make the keyway in there. This chuck is really too big for this little lathe. It really sticks out there a long ways, and it's pretty heavy, a lot of unsupported weight out there, but in a way it's better than that other one. It gives me more purchase. The jaws are bigger there. I run into a little bit of a problem with mounting this piece of stock in here. Neither one of my 3-jaw chucks, the jaws open up wide enough to accept this 1.5 inch piece. Well, I'm looking for a different alternative. I do have some reverse jaws for the big chuck over here, and I went and got those, and also dug out the 4-jaw chuck. It fits fine in the 4-jaw chuck. Now I've got to kind of center it. If I had a lot more material on here to take off, it wouldn't have been so critical to center it, but I've only got 5 thousandths to take off, or a little less than 5, I guess 3 thousandths to take off. So I'm going to have to center it. Now I'm no A-Bomb 79 or Keith Fenner, so it's going to take me a little bit more to center it than what those guys would. Well, we'll get it done. Well, it took me a bit, but I finally got this thing set up. I tried the 4-jaw chuck because it wouldn't fit on the inside jaws on the 3-jaw, either one of the 3-jaw chucks. And the 4-jaw chuck, it always would work pretty good, but it pulled the jaws out quite a ways to get on that, and it wouldn't tighten up, it wouldn't line up right. And when I got to looking at it, the outer threads on the 4-jaw chuck are all boogered up and stuff too, and it's all out of alignment. So anyway, I took it off and I put everything in some solvent to clean everything up and get all the crud and everything off of all of it. And I do have a set of outside jaws for this larger 3-jaw chuck here, and I got those out, cleaned everything up and put those in. Oh, that gives me a bite on that. I've got a live center on there, and it's not lined up very well, but it'll wind up being round when it's done. So I'm making my first cut on it now, taking off the skim coat, take off the rust, and see where we're at from there. I'm using a quick change tool post. I don't know what the number of this is, OXA, or maybe smaller than that. It was sold to mount on this 109 lathe. Got it on here, and it kind of fits on there, but it's I don't like it very well. For one thing, these tool holders are too deep, and you have a hard time getting the tools bits centered on the center line of the lathe. Now these I think these are 3/8 inch tool bits here. Might be 1/4 inch, that one might be. But anyway, I can get those on there, get those down lined up on the center without as much trouble. But like that boring bar and some of the other bits and stuff, you just can't get them down low enough. they ride on the bottom of this compound slide, and you can't get them to drop far enough down without them overhanging the compound slide. The other thing I don't like about it is it's a big blocky thing, and you're limited in how you can mount your tools. And like now with it mounted up here to cut here on the center, I've got room here because I've got this center hanging way out here on a different tail post, tailstock in here that I had made or got. It's threaded in here for a 1/2 inch 20, and then this live center, it sticks way out there. But if I used a dead center on there, I wouldn't have enough room to slide the carriage slide all the way over to get started on the end of this piece here. And I had to manipulate it around and change everything around to get this to fit in here now. And the way it is, you couldn't run this all the way up to the chuck, because then it runs into the cross slide or the compound slide here. So anyway, the lantern tool post holder I like a lot better. It's a lot more manipulable, but this is easier to change tools with this one. You just flip the lever and you can pop the tool out and change it. But not really a big fan of it on this lathe. It just takes up too much space. It's just too hard to use. You can see how much that center is walking. It's hanging way out there, and if I had a dead center in there and could get it up close, I could have mounted that center in tight and then got this piece adjusted so it was better centered in the jaws. But it is what it is. You work with what you got, I guess. Well, I got my little filler piece, slug, plug, whatever it is, done. It started out on this side, and of course my intent was just to go ahead and make this much of it the plug. But this machine is just so sloppy, there's so much flex in it every place, that when you put a little bit on it to try to set it to a certain depth of cut, it doesn't make that depth of cut, and then it'll cut deeper the next pass back, or the spring pass, and there's no graduated dials or anything to indicate how much you're moving anything. And there's so much backlash and everything, and like I said, so much slop and everything. If I tighten the gibs down, I probably should tighten the gibs down on that compound a little bit, maybe the cross side too, but if you tighten them down too much, then you can't move anything. These little handles on here are pretty small, and there's not much mechanical advantage to them, so it's real hard to move anything if you get them tightened up to where there's not much slop in them. The tailstock, of course, it's not tightened down now, but even when it's tightened down, the spindle here in the tailstock still moves up and down. I made 4 spring passes on here. Each time I'd take about 1/1000 off. That's how much spring there is in this machine. So anyway, I got that all done. That's going to be just right. That's going to fit in there tight. It's just they measure the same with the calipers, which of course is not perfectly accurate, but the ID of this and the OD of this are almost exactly the same. So if I take this, stick this in the oven and heat it up, and stick this in the freezer and cool it off, I should be able to press these together just right, and that'll make a nice tight fit in there, so this pulley won't spin on that when I bore that out for the bushing in there. Okay, that worked. I had the slug there in the oven for about, in the freezer for about a half an hour, 45 minutes, and the pulley in the oven. So Alright, went right in there. I had the pulley in the oven for about 45 minutes, set on about 500 degrees, and I put the slug in the freezer for the same length of time. It showed when I had that over by the lathe, they were tight and they wouldn't go in there, but I put that in here, took that slug over here and pulled this thing out of the oven, and that thing dropped right in there. Well, I wanted this slug to be more flush with that inside surface there where that's relieved out on that pulley, so I don't have to machine that out. That way my jaws on my chuck can fit in there, and then I can machine off the front face of that where it stands proud of that boss there. I can machine that down, just face it down. And so anyway, yeah, that worked perfect, just like it was meant to. That thing just slid right in there. We'll let that cool off, and then I'll probably center mark that slug and drill it out on the drill press progressively larger. The ultimate size of that opening is going to be 25 millimeters. I'll try to get it close enough to that I can put it on the lathe then and bore it out so it's concentric. This is cooled off enough now to pick it up, and there's no way that thing's coming out of there. Well, I went ahead and drilled a hole through this plug. Now the hole on the other side coming in from that side coming this way is surprisingly centered, but it comes out on this side. It's not close to being center, and I figured that was going to happen. That's the reason I didn't drill it any bigger than a 11/64. Now it's going to come out to about a 25 millimeter or 1 inch. I'm not sure. It's less than 1 inch. It's like 9.98 something, but it's got to come out a little bigger than that to fit over that, of course, and then put a keyway in it. So anyway, I'll bore that hole out so it's concentric here on the lathe. I've got it mounted up here on the lathe now, and I had about a little less than 1/4 of an inch or so overhang or stick out of that plug that stuck out this front face. So I'm going ahead and facing that off now. I've got it about 1/3 of the way off. Got to do it just a little bit at a time on this lathe, but it's actually going pretty good. And I did tighten up my gibs on the compound here, and now I can't turn it at all, but it's nice and tight. It's better than it was. I've still got some flex here somewhere in this tool post, and I tightened up the gibs on this cross slide, and it's still turning, but it's pretty tough. So I've got it a lot tighter, taking some of the chatter out of there. So anyway, I'll move this down one. Let's pulley down one side. It's chatter, or it's in back gear here, and the back gears are kind of bouncing a little bit, so if I slow that down a little bit, maybe that'll help. So here we go. We'll go ahead and keep facing that off, and a little bit slower. I can take more than that. The slug in there is faced off flush with the face on this pulley. Change the tools now and go ahead and start boring that out. Try to get that hole concentric and get it all bored out to size. Let's see how bad she crashes here now. But starting the boring operation, and of course the front end of this hole is pretty off center. We're going for our second pass in here. Got everything set up here now. I just took a stop, took a break, and I took a easy lap. There it is. Easy lap diamond hone, and just honed that carbide end on that a little bit. Those are pretty rough. When you clean them up, you got paint and stuff on them, you can't really tell what they're like, but once you put a hone to them, you can see that they're pretty rough. So that should cut a little better. Sharpen the point up a little bit. I'm not taking a very big bite at this at a time, just barely scratching it. This little lathe just won't take much of the time. It's just barely held on in there, and that little 3-jaw chuck, if I take too much of a bite on it, it's liable to come flying out of there. It won't come flying out too hard, but it will come out of there and probably cause some kind of damage. So anyway, we're just doing a little bit at a time until we get that rounded out. I'm not even worried about taking any measurements on it yet. I won't do that till I start getting it trued up, concentric, that hole. Well, that pass is taking a pretty good chunk off of there. It's got the spring in it from going through once and coming back, plus I cranked in a little bit more on it, but there's some pretty good shavings coming out of there this time. It's a pretty nice, smooth, uniform turn, and I'm getting a smoother finish on the inside than I did on the outside on that. I'm using that carbide cutter, and anyway. Alright, I got 0.78 ID on that now, and we got to come out to 0.98 or 0.99 is the diameter of that shaft. So been working on this boring bar cutter a little bit with this easy lap diamond lapper, and trying to figure out or get it sharpened up a little bit. And after working on the front of it here, this is the front cutting face, and I've lapped it and got it pretty well flattened out here, but I can see that right here on this corner, the top of the corner of this cutter right here where the actual cutting takes place is actually back from the face of that. I don't know whether it shows up on there or not, but yeah, you can kind of see the shiny spot on there. Well, that's probably why it was pushing back and not cutting, feeding in. Now this side over here was peeling off a pretty good chip, pretty much like a planer does, but it's feeding a different way. It's feeding from this angle is coming back this way, so it's feeding into it gradually and then peeling off on this face right here. So as it contacts right here and then this feeds in, it's just peeling that off just like a planer blade would peel off wood out of a planer. And so anyway, a few more minutes working on this with the diamond stone, getting that corner sharp on there. Maybe I'll get this thing to where it cuts. Although I'm just about done anyway, I could just keep fooling with it. I'm up to 90.93 I think on there, the last measurement, and I need to go to 0.99, 98 or 99. So I'm getting pretty close anyway, but if I get this sharp, it'll give me a little more control of the cut. Alright, I'm getting a curl off of that now. It's cutting now. It wasn't cutting like that before. I've just got a light cut going in there now. I just got it set, adjusted pretty much where it was before. The only difference is the taking the machine off and resetting it. I didn't adjust the cutting depth at all on it, so it's going to change a little bit just because it does. But it's making a fine cut right now, and I'm getting some shavings off of that where I wasn't getting anything like that before. So that thing's cutting now. And I've got to watch how much I do take off there at a time, because I'm down to 0.93 5, I think it was on there. I can't remember now. So I only have what, 5 thousandths left to go on that to take it, or 500,000, 5 tenths. Anyway, only got a little bit to go from 0.9 to 0.93 to 0.99. But that's, yeah, that made a big difference on it. That's cutting and getting curls now. Still getting a little bit of a squeal, but not near like it was. And making a nice sharp edge in there where the cut's going to too, instead of it was kind of a dull edge in there where it was making the cut. So that's making nice pretty curls. Oh yeah, look at that. Yeah, a few minutes with a diamond hoe and it makes a lot of difference on the way that thing's cutting. Holy, I mean, I should have done that sooner. Now he needs a chip breaker on that. Probably not going fast enough to, well, I've never did that before. Well, look how shiny that surface is underneath there too. I was getting that on it before. I mean, it's getting a nice shiny surface, more so than what I had on the outside when I cut the outside in there before, but this is a whole lot better. I just made my first full cut in on this piece with it after sharpening that bit, and this is what I was getting out of there now. Before I was just getting fine chips and it was pushing itself out of the cut. Now I'm getting ribbon. Now I know these long ribbons are not ideal, but it's a hell of a lot better than what I was getting before. And I'm pulling that out of there now. I'm going ahead and outfeeding. I don't know whether it's making any cut or not on outfeeding now, but it pulled itself into the cut and made a nice smooth cut going in. I got long ribbons here. I suppose with a chip breaker or more something I could get it to where it was breaking the chips, but it's a heck of a lot better than it was. It's making a nice cut. This is what I used to hone that with, and I don't have a grinder, a diamond wheel, or anything like that to grind those with. This is just a medium, easy lap hone and stone, and just I don't know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes sitting there on the stool, polishing that edge up and making it sharp, and that made all the difference in the world in the way that thing cuts. This is the little kit that I got a year or so ago. I think I got it, and I don't remember where I got it. I don't know whether this is one from Discount Machine, Shars, or somebody else, but it's just a little cheap braised tip boring bar set, and I don't have the ability, the knowledge to make a boring bar, and these were cheap. I thought I'd give them a try, and they worked okay. I used this one here, maybe. No, it must have been this one here. I'm boring some aluminum last year, and I did kind of honed it down a little bit too with that hone, and it worked okay for that. I'd started using it on this, and there's just too much flex in it for this. Actually, I was using it on the cast iron on the pulley itself to bore it out, and there's just so much flex in it. I probably should have sharpened it, but I didn't need one that long. I put a heavier one, a shorter one in there, and that was working better. But was sharpening that thing up with a few minutes with a stone really made a difference. And I didn't expect much out of those boring bars, but you're not getting much out of them. Carbide is not an ideal cutting tool for this, a lathe like this. It has as much flex in it as this, but as you get them sharp and they chip off, and if you leave them the way they're cut, then they took too much pressure from one of these machines. But I'm happy with that, the way that's cutting now. That's a heck of a lot better than what I was getting. And I'm not getting just scraping on there now on the back coming out of there. I'm not getting big shavings like I was before on the spring cut. Just getting scrapings on there now. So I just took the chuck off of there, off the lathe, and took this over and tried it on the shaft. I checked it with the calipers first, and it was 0.991, which is just perfect. And it went from the spring in this thing and the sharp cutter from 9.3 to 991. That's how much spring I was getting in that dull cutter. Well, you look in the bore on that, you see how nice and smooth and shiny that is. You can see you can make out where the line is, where this sleeve is put in there. I guess I should have left that on there and chamfered that. Not camphor. Clean this up and I'll mount this back on and put a chamfer on that. Anyway, got a couple more things to do. Drill out this and tap this hole for the set screw, and get a keyway cutter and cut a key in that. I'm pretty much done with my boring. All the boring stuff is done now. And now that the boring bar is sharp, I don't need it anymore. I decided that since I still had the boring bar in there, I'd go ahead and face off the inside of this bushing with the pocket in this pulley, and I've got that done now. It's all nice and smooth in there. So I'll go ahead and change my cutters over and put a regular cutter in there now, and chamfer the hole here, and then turn that around on the chuck and chamfer the other side, the front face. I need to put a keyway in that pulley. I've done it before with just a file, and it always turns out kind of butchered up, but that was kind of what the machinist I was. It was just a file and chisel, and hammer and chisel mechanic. Anyway, as I've been learning this stuff, seeing that they use these brooches to do this with, to put the keyways in nice and neat. I'd never really seen it done before, but I watched it done on a YouTube channel, a guy by the name of Lyle Peterson, Mr. Pete 222. He does an amazing job of teaching basic machinist stuff, which is probably not that amazing since he was a retired high school machinist shop teacher, but he does a real good job with that, and I've learned a lot from it. One of the things I learned was how to broach a keyway, so that's what I'm going to do. I looked at different ways of doing this. I looked at different things, getting a keyway kit. The basic ones are pretty expensive, a couple $100 or so. Found that you could buy a brooch, just a brooch separate, and so I was looking at brooches and stuff and looking at eBay. Now it turned out the best place to buy one was on MCS, I think it is. So I got this, I measured it out and figured it out was 6mm. I've got a keyway kit, a kit with keys in it, and I tried all the different sizes of keys that I had, and none of them fit. I measured it out with a micrometer, actually with the dial calipers, not with the micrometer, but and actually with a digital caliper, not a dial caliper. But anyway, measured it out with the calipers and figured it was 6mm. I found that I could get a 6mm brooch on our MCS for about $20, which was not too bad a price for just one brooch. And then you need a bushing for it, and there's different sizes of bushing depending on the size of the hole that you need to broach. And I found the bushing again on MCS, and I got it for about $7 or $8, I think. One thing that I did do that cost me a little bit extra was it says in the catalog that you need, hey, what are you doing? I don't need your help. It says in the catalog that you need a shim to shim that, and of course that's how they show it being done on the videos and stuff, is how you do that, is you run this brooch down through there one time, and these teeth, the brooch is tapered as it goes down, so these teeth cut more and more as they go down. So the first ones that go through just cut a little bit, and the next one's a little bit more and more on, so on down the line. so it's taking just a little bit off at a time. And then once you go through it one time, then you pull it out and you put a shim behind the broach, and you go through again, and that makes the depth of the cut the right depth, and you're not taking too much material off at one time. And it said in the catalog that you needed a shim with that, so I ordered a shim from MCS2 to go along with it. And then it turns out that the broach came with the shim. Actually, here's the package that came with the broach for the shim. Oh no, that's the bushing, 25mm bushing for the 25mm hole in that. Okay, so that was 20 bucks for the bushing. No, it wasn't. That's just a part number. That's not the price. Yeah, that's what I thought. The price it was like 5 or 6 bucks for the bushing. Here's the package for the shim. Well, anyway, I ordered a shim for it, but it turns out that the broach comes with a shim, so I didn't really need to do that. Well, I've got this set up on my Harbor Freight Central Hydraulics made in China 20-ton hydraulic press. So there's the pulley set up on the press. Hey, there's a little bit of space between the bottom of the ram and the top of this broach, and I happen to find a couple of pieces of metal to use to fit in there for spacers on that, so I can make a continuous push on that, at least as far as the ram on the hydraulic cylinder is. And they just happen to be the cutoffs from the piece that I milled out or machined out to make that bushing to fit in there. I'm going to go ahead and put some cutting oil. This is just the same cutting oil that I use on the lathe. Okay, now we can see, take this bushing out of there, and there's just the start of a keyway in there. Cool, that's a lot easier than doing it with a file. I'll stick the shim down in there. Okay, I'll give it a try. There's the little cuts that it makes on there. They're all rolled up. And here's my, yeah, that looks pretty good. That's a real nice key way in there. A little burr on this side here. I'll take a little bit of a file and take the burr off of that, and that's good. Now I was going to put the keyway underneath where the original lock screw was, but I decided it's probably easier just to go ahead and drill the proper size hole for a tap in clean metal rather than trying to get a drill bit down through this hole without disturbing the threads in it and then threading that hole. So I'll go ahead and drill that and tap it for a set screw. Now, it might have been less expensive to go ahead and buy a new pulley from Grizzly for that, but the educational value of this was worth it. Turning down that piece to fit in there, getting it to fit in underneath heat so it's in there, it won't spin or anything. That was all just time, because everything else I already had the metal and everything, so that was a learning experience there, getting that down so I had the internal diameter of that hole right to fit over the shaft, doing the boring on there, sharpening that boring bar up and getting it to cut, and turning the OD down, getting it just so it's a heat shrink fit, which turned out just perfect. And then this is the first time that it's the most money I've got into this is for this broach and this setup here with the broach and the collar. I'll probably never use these again. I don't know whether I'll ever broach again or not, but anyway, it was an experience. It was fun, and it's kind of neat to see everything turn out right. Anyway, I'm happy with that, the way it turned out. Yeah, this is what it looks like with the oil off of it, cleaned up a little bit. I did take the burrs off of that. I can get my jeweler's files and do a little better job taking the burrs off, but I think I'm really happy with that. For somebody that's a hammer and chisel mechanic, I think that's pretty good. Here's what it looks like with a piece of key stock in there. That's a 6mm key stock. That's the one mistake that I did make, is when I ordered that brooch and stuff off of MSC, got a pretty good deal on them, and the shipping was free. But I made a mistake and I didn't order the key stock at the same time. And when I went back to order it, it wound up like $3 or $4 for a length of key stock, but it cost me like $30 or $40 for shipping. So I wound up getting this piece of key stock off of eBay for $8, which is twice what it cost in MSC.